This edition of Farming the Countryside is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience Range and Pasture. Your land, your herd, our commitment. Learn more at rangeandpasture.com/countryside. Here's a look at some of the work we've been doing with Corteva Pasture and Range on our farm.
Well, spring of 2026 here, I think our plan is look at the ultigraze in a couple of places where we need to do that just because we need the fertility, but we also need the weed control in some hard to get to places. But then we'll prioritize pastures that didn't get treated with NovaGraze or Adoracor last year, just knowing those will probably be problem spots. Evaluate what we did use NovaGraze with last year and see if we have enough annual Espadiza that helps with weed control, or if we need to go in and spray there again to help continue to promote that Espadiza and hopefully even some white clover.
White clover is really nice to introduce into these cool season grass pastures. It is very tolerant to lower soil pHs, to poor fertility, and so they're a little more forgiving than a lot of other legumes. But having white clover in there also is going to help you out with your nutritional needs for your cattle.
To see more from our farm and others, just go to rangeandpasture.com/countryside.
Hi, I'm Andrew McCrae. Welcome to our farm and ranch in northwest Missouri. My great-great-grandfather settled here in 1910, and I'm the fifth generation to grow crops and livestock here. As a farmer myself, I know the highs and lows of this life, the issues we confront every day, some new, some as old as farming itself. This show is a place to talk with farmers and others in the ag industry about topics that mean something to us, topics that can improve the present and future of our operations. This is Farming the Countryside.
W.J. Alberson joins me here on Farming the Countryside from Aledo, Illinois. W.J., good to see you. I was in your town not too long ago, and good to connect again here.
Yeah, good morning, Andrew. It was nice to have you in Aledo and see it firsthand.
Yeah. Well, for those that don't know about Aledo, you might want to describe kind of how big a town it is, and then you and your wife have roots in that area and kind of farm roots in that area too.
Yep, Krista and I grew up here in Aledo. It's a small town, a county seat town of about 3,700 people. County is maybe 16,000 population. And, we grew up here, Krista and I, in the early 80s, late 80s, when the downtown was a thriving place to be. We had the J.C. Penney's and all kinds of mom and pop shops, and just a place where you stop by on your walk home from school or bike ride and stop in the drugstore, just kind of that small town feeling when we're growing up.
Yeah, and of course the 80s were hard times in a lot of small towns that relied on farming, and that it sounds like the case in Aledo. And by the time you get to the early 2000s, several vacant buildings there. Is that what you'd say?
Yeah, and actually, there was kind of an early resurgence in the 2000s, and Aledo became a Illinois Main Street community. But then the 2008-09 crisis hit us hard because a local bank failed, and folks that had investments, even some of the business owners had investments with that bank, were now shuttering their buildings. So I would say kind of that post-09 was really kind of thing that closed everything up in downtown Aledo.
So you obviously have roots there, and you have, with your work, you were still there, but not always there. I don't know how we want to describe that.
Yeah.
But you saw all this going on, right?
Yeah, true. I think it hit us hardest. We were back 2017. My grandparents started having some health issues, and we didn't speak to, you asked me the question, rural roots here in Aledo. My wife's folks still farm. My father-in-law, he'll be 80 this year, and he still row crops, corn and soybeans, Black Angus cattle. So we were always back spring and fall, kids helping out on the farm, running some machinery and things like that. But in 2017, with my grandparents' health kind of going downhill, we were back a lot, from assisted living to, selling the house and hospice care and all this kind of thing. They were married 72 years. So there's some things to be here for. And it was a special time, but we also saw Aledo in a state that, it hurt because, again, as kids, we saw it as a bustling downtown and there wasn't a lot going on.
So you see all that. What
Mhm.
leads you then to begin to invest? And were there others? I know this is not just your story, it's kind of the
Right.
story of the entire town and what begins to happen.
Yeah. I would say so. In 2016, we were able to, the city of Aledo or downtown Aledo became a National Park Service historic district. So it's the downtown Aledo historic district, and there's about 80 buildings that encompass that. And so we started talking. I specifically had purchased a building and was talking with the city. How can we take this building and use that national park designation, use the tax credits, federal and state rehabilitative tax credits to take one of these buildings as a model, an example of how it could work to fix it up and become a viable business. And that took until about, let's see, fall of 2019. I think I've told you this story. The Carnegie Library went up for auction in our town for the starting bid of $12,000. So here you got this, pretty good size structure, but really without ADA accessibility, it become obsolete. And the appraisal said its best case use was demolition. So here you've got this 100-year-old building, and they tearing it down is the best solution for the thing. That's kind of what started our adventure, I guess, because we're here and we didn't want this building getting snatched up for a nominal amount and then just continue to deteriorate and fill up with stuff. So that kind of started that adventure, and it became our tax credit project, I guess you might say.
Well,
Go ahead.
with the you mentioned with the tax credits and
Yeah.
people listening to this, would you say that because some will say, "Oh, well, I can't do that because Aledo had tax credits."
Mhm.
I'm guessing you're going to tell me though, a lot of towns can do similar things, whether they may have tax credits or not. Is it just you find what works in your town and begin to make some of this happen, or how would you describe what happened there?
I would say so. I mean, the task of the getting 80 buildings into a historic district, you might say, hey, that's going to take a lot, but we had local folks that put that application and submission together and got it approved. I think there are paths forward without tax credits, and we've actually, we might get to this where we've done a little of both, because sometimes the rehabilitations you have to do to be able to get those credits are kind of cost prohibitive in themselves. So that's why the credits exist, to help kind of get over some of those hurdles. But if you have to replace all windows in a large building with original, style, or not even replace, but rehabilitate those windows, you got to put the old glass back in and so forth. It becomes easier just to put new modern windows in and not use the credits. So I guess long story short to your question, yeah, it can work both ways, I believe.
Yeah, that is a good point because I've seen that library, and you're right, because of the tax credits, but that designation, you have to do certain things that you might not otherwise do,
Right.
which makes the cost higher. So,
Right.
when you began this, then was it a thing where you said, "I'm going to take a certain amount of money and I just want to invest, and if I don't get my money back, that's all right," or was there a part of you said, "We can invest in these buildings and we can do things that are going to not only help the town, which is
Mhm.
nice, philanthropic, but we can do this because it's just good business. We can make money."
Mhm. That was definitely the hope. I mean, in terms of, I can't say that the first steps, we're 5 years later now, so we can kind of do that. We can go back forensically and look at, hey, did this work or is it working, and that kind of thing. And we didn't know going into it, say with the library, hey, we are going to designate this amount of money and we want to use it as a model to show others it can work. We didn't know if it'd work or not, so I guess it was a little bit of a blind faith. God doesn't call the equipped, God doesn't equip the called. Oh geez, I just botched that all together. The God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called, right? So we were being equipped, I guess, and trying to figure out how do we make this work. So, if I put it, if we went backwards to that fall of 2019, we signed a contract to remodel this library and thought we had it all mapped out. And March of 2020, when we started demolition, a pandemic hit. So here we thought we had it all figured out, and we didn't even know, if our other investments are still good. Here we are investing in this building and actually a couple others at the same time. And I don't know, the pandemic kind of gave us a viewpoint, but it also opened up an opportunity for us to make this library a place for remote workers. And because one of the key components was we were bringing data fiber or fiber access to the facility. So what we saw during the pandemic, as we're working on the building, hey, people are returning to small towns to be with family, and they're working remotely. So it kind of ended up in our favor. So that kind of blind faith action, ended up, we were kind of rewarded in that now we had a facility for folks to come work at.
There is more than just what you're doing going on as all of this is happening. And one of the things is the building you're setting in the Opera House there. You may want to describe that and what begins to happen around that, because that's become a real focal point in your community and really shows what can be done.
Yeah, there are a couple, I would say, starting with the Carnegie Library, which became kind of this job center. We found that, okay, now people, if they're going to come work in these technology jobs or come home to work, we need more housing. So then we started working on some upper story residential housing above the old buildings. But then as these kids are working here, well, what else are we going to do downtown? Like, what else is there to do? And where do we eat? And so, as you're bringing folks back from maybe urban areas or folks or kids that have just graduated college where there are a lot of these amenities or things to do, we started to find, well, it's not just about jobs, it's not just about housing, but also what are some things to do. And with Aledo Opera House being one of those historic district properties, one that we didn't use tax credits on. However, it had a stage as well as the ability to show movies. So we could do multiple things. It wasn't just about watching movies. It was about a place where we could bring a lot of community activities in-house.
Yeah, that facility now, as you mentioned, it very nice inside, and you have not only movies on the weekends, but you can host all kinds of different events there.
Yeah. Last weekend was a live country music, but we've had bluegrass, jazz, comedians, just a variety of stage performances. However, from a community event standpoint too, like the high school had an art auction where local art was auctioned off on stage to raise money for those kids at the high school for their art. So it's really a multi-purpose, I guess, venue.
Yeah. One of the things that you just mentioned there, and I hear this from a lot of small towns and see it when I'm traveling, is housing. People will say, we need more housing, and they struggle with, okay, how do we do that? So describe there in Aledo, you said about the upstairs, but are those just apartments? Could that be for families? And then Is that filling the need, or is there more need that you can't fill because you need to actually have standalone homes that are being built too?
Right. So it'd been years. I mean, there's not been many new home starts in this county in decades, honestly. And even before the upper story residential part began, we also, across from the Carnegie Library, my wife and I attended a junior high school across the street that had been vacant for 20 years. It's a 3-story brick structure. And that is actually under development for 30 residential units. So they call it workforce housing. So we knew we needed these young adults in here, maybe working in jobs in the downtown or in the community, and that becomes a struggle. So that school with the 30 residential right in the downtown is now the largest downtown project that's ever happened in Mercer County, financially. So the residentials above the buildings have really become kind of almost like an Airbnb overnight stay revenue that we hadn't anticipated either. You know, if you have these overnight stays, and just to keep the math simple, let's say it's $200 a night, so $400 a weekend, 4 weekends, $1,600 a month if you have these booked just on the weekend. Well, there's not we struggle to get half that rent for a regular residential apartment. So it kind of filled that need of a small town not being able to support a hotel. Hey, we have people coming in for weddings and funerals and reunions and, life, coming back to see family and friends. They became kind of that de facto hotel for our community, those upper story units.
Who is doing this work? Obviously, you're involved with it, but do you see people? Is it local business owners? Is it farmers? Who's investing the money and the time to make some of this happen?
Yeah, it's definitely a collection or a collective. Something that was very important, I think, that happened in downtown Aledo, and something the city has been very supportive, of everything we've been doing. But they hired a full-time Main Street director. So not only is there an Illinois Main Street program, but our community is one of the Illinois Main Street communities once again, and we've never had a Main Street full-time director. So the city supported that, and that director, Lindsay, was able to help fill in the programming part of it and do some of the marketing and support the local businesses that are in the downtown.
What would you? I'm sure you get asked this quite a bit, because Aledo now, there's still work to be done, obviously, but you've done so much. What advice do you give to other towns then that may say, well, we haven't even begun this process, or, well, it's different here, we don't have the right people? And so you've heard all of this, and not that there are challenges and excuses, but what do you tell them?
Well, it's definitely not a one size fits all approach. And, we've learned a lot over the 5 years, and I'm just going to put a plug here. I'm not a big AI guy, but the funny thing is, we kind of 5 years later here, we typed in or through our information and data that we had as a community and things we had built to date, and AI is able to basically tell us things. If we would have known this 5 years ago, we would have started there. But it actually, upper story living, some of the occupancies of our buildings, you should have a coffee shop, you should have a brewery, you should have it kind of, it solidified some of the things that we were doing as a community. I didn't mean to, AI is just a tool that I had never really thought of, and we all have to start thinking of is how we can use it as a tool, not necessarily, a way of life, but how can it be a thought partner in what we're doing in our small communities? Because we are limited to the people of the community. If you got a farmer, a banker, and a butcher and a baker on your board of directors, you can also have this thought partner that all this data is out there to become useful. So another local organization called Visit Merco. So it's a nonprofit entity that's trying to drive additional folks to our town, to things like the Rhubarb Festival and other festivals in our community. They're using kind of Galena as their shining star. So Galena, Illinois has about 1 million visitors a year, and they're actually a smaller town than Aledo, Illinois. Their sales tax revenue 10 times what Aledo, Illinois is today. So if I was to say, what's kind of our aspirations is as a community, we don't want to become, it's not about doubling your size as a community necessarily, but it's about bringing others to experience your community, bring those dollars in from a sales tax standpoint that can further elevate the town, bring jobs, bring other opportunities in our downtown specifically.
You mentioned about the jobs and the businesses. Has there been a way to help create those new businesses or give them help to begin?
Yeah, that's something, not only Visit Merco, Aledo Main Street, City of Aledo, they've all had different workshops. One of those programs is through Western Illinois University in Macomb. They actually have a point person there that will help individuals once they've identified someone interested in starting a business. They'll come walk side by side, building a business plan, and kind of helping those individuals see before they jump in, here's what this is going to look like. We can assign a rent to a building, and someone comes in, I'll rent it, and I want to start a business, but rent is a very small component to business success. And so it's so great that all these other entities in the community are coming alongside businesses to let's make sure we can make this successful.
Where do you feel are still the most challenging parts in Aledo? I know there's always work to be done, but what's on the horizon and what are the biggest challenges?
Well, I don't know if it's a challenge yet, but it is a challenge in that I would consider there's still not a date night restaurant. Like back when I was a kid, there was a couple steakhouses, right? You go get a steak. And I feel like being in an agricultural community, that's my biggest, goal right now is recruiting a restaurant, a date night restaurant, that complements other things we have going on. And I realize you have to have the folks that support that. And we've actually done studies of how much restaurant loss is like credit card data nowadays can tell you how many Mercer County dollars are being spent outside of our county. And in a restaurant capacity or food, it's a big number. So, again, I want to put data to it so that we can recruit that restaurant that can survive in our downtown. But that's kind of that's my goal right now is I want a date night restaurant that kind of supports these other things we're doing.
People listening to this will say, well, how do you have time to do all this? Because you have we'll put in quotes, another job, a real job besides this, correct?
Yeah,
so how do you make all of it happen?
Yeah, this is my side hustle, I guess you might call it. It is great. I was a business owner in the community in a portion of my life. I grew up here. Again, my wife has been here and had some other roles in the community. So we really feel like if someone was coming from another town or another city and trying to do all this, we feel best prepared to be the ones kind of stewarding the process. And I don't know, I guess that gives you the motivation, even when you got other stuff to going on outside of Aledo, to really make this happen. You want to, it's kind of like your football team or your basketball team or it's our team Aledo that we want to see win and be successful again.
In the time we've got remaining, what would you tell a person that says, well, I'd love to do something? Where would they get started? Is it go buy a building, or what would you tell them to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think just those, get involved with your community, whether it's an event planning coordinator, maybe there's a downtown development community or group, go to your city council meetings. Used to be years ago, there'd be news stations and radio stations, all these folks that would attend a city council meeting, and now it's pretty nominal who even shows up. So I guess, it doesn't have to be financial. We're always looking for volunteers and helping out in what we're doing. And as you know, everybody doesn't all have the same talents. So, it takes a group to really make things happen, and just raise your hand and be involved in your community.
And we should mention that thanks to you, we are heard on the station there in Aledo in a brand new studio. And it's really nice because you've got glass overlooking, in a sense, the downtown, or looking out on the streets there in downtown Aledo.
Yeah, WRMJ.com. So WRMJ is a local county radio station and started in 1979. And again, part of my growing up, and just glad to be a part of that and welcoming guys like you to the studio and being able to be part of our radio station.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed my time there. And for folks that are listening to this and they might be there south of the Quad Cities sometime, it's certainly worth the time to go, or go during Rhubarb Festival, which is coming up, first weekend in June?
Yep, first weekend of June. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't say too, the things that we're doing. We talked about jumping into your small town. We kind of say metaphorically with our faith, broken things plus love equals restoration. So like we feel like it's a town being restored. And, if there are things out there that seem in desperate times, or desperate situations, just bring some love to it, and you'll have that feeling of being restored again.
Well, WJ, I appreciate the time and appreciate all that you and others are doing there in town.
Thanks, Andrew.
This edition of Farming the Countryside has been brought to you by Corteva Agriscience Range and Pasture. Your land, your herd, our commitment. Learn more at rangeandpasture.com/countryside.